with your moral uplift or with the life to come. That only relates to your closeness to a certain people or your being apart from a certain people. This culture can be adopted without interference with your religion, or sometimes at the cost of your religion. Generally speaking, the best formula for a culture is given in this English saying that when in Rome, do as Romans do. Now this is cultural advice. A Britisher, if he goes to Rome and starts doing as Romans do, he is not violating any British rules, nor any Christian rules, neither politically, nor culturally, nor in any other respect. What he is doing is that he wants to identify himself with the sea of people around him. And that identification can be done through culture, through adopting that culture. Unless you are culturally the same, unless those barriers, which are cultural barriers, are removed, those people who come and settle in a country, and even if they get naturalized and get the nationality of that nation, that people, they still remain aloof. They remain apart, mainly because of these cultural gaps. And most of the racial hatreds which we find in some regions, they also spring from these cultural gaps. So culture is different and religion is different. In culture, many a time you can adopt a culture without sacrificing your religion. But occasionally it so happens, and particularly it so happens with Islam, that most of the cultures as found in the world today do not entirely agree with Islamic values. So there has to be a separation at some place. And this is why the fundamental rule for accepting a religion is that you must give precedence to religion over every other value. This is what has been laid very clear in the Holy Quran in so many places. And also this is exactly what has been included in the conditions of Bai'at, that is initiation, by Hadhrat Mirza Tahir Ahmed. मैं दीन को दुनिया पर मुकद्दम रखूंगा. I will always give preference to religion over worldly affairs. So thus, when we define the relationship between religion and culture, like I have done, then the second part of your question automatically drops out. Always, every time, when you find yourself on the crossroad and you have to decide between culture or religion, and you cannot reconcile one with the other without damaging the other, then the only course prescribed by religion to you is follow religion and sacrifice cultural values, and be ready to go through any punishment if the society meets punishment out to you. Now, with parda, observation of parda or anything else, whatever you may call it, for instance, it's not the ladies only who are put on trial, it is men also who are always on trial in different cultural values. Here in England, they go for dancing, drinking, clubs and things which always invite you in the name of culture towards things which are declared evil in the Holy Quran. Gambling, and when you don't mix up with them in all these departments, then you become aloof. Even if you are British national, you are no longer British because there are cultural differences. So you have to accept it, and accept it in a manner that through propagation you win over that society and assimilate it into Islamic culture. So when I said Islamic culture, a new factor has got introduced now in our discussion. Previously we were only speaking of religion and culture as two different things, having different spheres, occasionally meeting in certain spheres. But now when I speak of Islamic culture, what I mean to say is this, that Islam has spoken so much on everyday life that no other religion has spoken so much. And looking at it from this angle, you may declare it to be a very demanding religion. So demanding that it turns life into a sort of imprisonment. Now this is not sarcasm. This is in reality what it is. This is exactly what Hadhrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam has declared it to be, where he says, "Ad-dunya sijnul lil mu'mini wa jannatul lil kafir." This world is a prison for believers and a heaven for the non-believers. So that heaven lies in their different cultural values. And this imprisonment is the imprisonment of Sharia. So inside the prison there is also a sort of culture. And outside the prison there is also a sort of culture. Now what are the fundamental differences in Islamic culture and the non-Islamic culture? The fundamental differences, of course there are so many differences, but I am only going to make it clear to you that despite the fact that Islam is a religion, it also has a sort of culture. And in fact every culture, as I had earlier mentioned, is colored by some religion. Though it gets divorced in the passage of time and acquires an independent identity. But looking back again at the question of culture, if you begin to study it from this angle, you will immediately recognize the effect of religion on cultures. Now here, for instance, in the Western society, the Jewish are as much Western as any other people are, the Jewish people, yet there is a marked difference between the culture of the Jews and the culture of the Christians. Indian culture is a so-called Indian culture, but it is not just one culture. The Muslim way of life there was different, and the Hindu way of life there was different, and the Buddhist way of life was different from the Hindu way of life. And all these three people, as far as nationality went, were Indians, yet their cultures were different. And again, the Hindu culture was not just one single culture. Culture is a very delicate mixing up of certain religious values with certain local values, and that mending produces a culture which comes into its own and becomes an independent way of life. So Hinduism, wherever it got wed to local cultures, in the south it acquired a different culture. When it got wed to the cultures in north of India, and so in the east and west, it became different cultures, yet all had the same Hindu features in those cultures. This is exactly what has happened in the case of Islam. When we speak of Islamic culture, It is a very